In financial interest above the interests of ordinary people.
Okay, that's capitalism. Let's be clear. Putting the interests, the thing he just, that is just capitalism. Capitalism as a system is built to put the interest of capital owners above everybody else. That's just kind of the way capitalism works. So there's a lot of kind of elements to the Silicon Valley Bank stuff that I like there's a lot of angles to it, but somebody who we don't really look at, that I don't think I've watched any of his content, even like on my own, is Russel Brand. He's like, he's a comedian. He was a comedian, right? Like, because I first saw him in, what's the movie? What is it? Forgetting Sarah Marshall? Yeah. Like, I first saw him in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Love that movie. Fun movie. And like, I saw him in Get Him to the Greek. He was in other stuff. And then I guess he got into podcasting and politics. I'm aware of like some of his takes. He's, what's it called? I mean, he seems very like new agey spirit type. But we don't really look at him, so I'm kind of curious. I want to do something. I want to kind of like get some kind of idea of what his content is actually like. Most of the time, if I see his stuff, it's like other people reacting to it. But I haven't like personally watched any of it. Russell Brand is up. Okay, cool. He's dope. I know he smokes dope. I know he smokes weed. Obsession. Woke has become more broad nowadays. Conservatives use it way too much. I feel like they call anything leftist. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Like, that's, yeah. They just call and like, I don't really mind if you want to be like every time I have a conversation with somebody and they're like, I don't like something, this or that, that's woke. We have to spend like 5 minutes breaking down, like going over, okay, what does that mean? Does it only mean this thing? And then if you're concerned about this thing, then like, let's talk about that then. I don't know why we're talking about wokeness. And then they mention something else and say that's woke. And I'm like, wait, I thought you said woke was this, it was this thing. And they're like, well, it's kind of both. And then you're like, it just muddies the water. It gums up the conversation, I found. But left leaving libertarian outside. Okay. But anyway, yeah, let's go. Yeah, and like also Marky, like keep in mind, like an obsession over identity politics is in and of itself also different from an obsession with race and victim mentality. Like those two things are different. So that like not to call you out or anything, but like that's what I mean. Where it's like people like it's really hard to not like immediately be like, oh, it's like this, and then you're like, oh, well, I guess to me it's this, and it's like, well, which one is it? We don't all have a shared fucking definition, and like, without a shared definition, it's kind of a useless term. Politically, I guess it's useful for Republicans, but that doesn't really make it good. But either way, let's get into the video. I want to hear his take on the SVB stuff.
No, there's a financial crisis. Hopefully it won't have been caused by deregulation. Hopefully you won't.
Is he Australian? I don't.
End up bailing them
is he
out
just straight?
I'm
kind of curious.
Hopefully some of the same people that were involved in the 2008 financial crisis won't be involved in this one.
Yeah.
Hello there, you 6 million
English.
awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us on this voyage towards truth and freedom, a voyage that must be undertaken together, where we must find new unity, where we have to stop throwing rocks at one another and find ways of uniting, coming.
I like all of these things.
Together in a conciliatory fashion in order to confront centralized.
He's in Death of the Nile? When the fuck is he in Death on the Nile? IMDb, you have. Wait, is he? Am I crazy? Is he in Death on the Nile? I saw that movie. Okay, I guess he is. Holy shit.
If you don't subscribe to our channel yet, subscribe to it right now.
English
Turn on the
comedian.
Bell.
Okay,
That's
so he was
the
always a
way
comedian.
that the algorithm is going to let you get our daily content.
Not wrong.
Join us every day on
like the stream
Rumble.
on
it's fantastic
whatever
content there. We talk about it in a much
platform
way, and of course, we're free to say whatever we want to say. And what we want to say is,
he's from Essex, an Essex boy.
That's the message.
Him and Will
one of the ways we can change the world is by
Okay.
observing patterns. For example, if there was a massive bank crash in 2008 that was caused by impropriety, deregulation, prioritizing financial interests above the interests of ordinary people, that literally had some of the
Is that what caused the crash? Let me get a rewind on that really quick. I think most of that was right, but I do think some of it was...
Can change the world is by observing patterns. For example, if there was
Okay. Off the bat, I just want to say, we as humans are very good at recognizing patterns. Be wary of that, because that sometimes will betray you.
massive bank crash in 2008 that was caused by impropriety.
Okay, impropriety, if we're talking about the rating agencies, you know, giving preferential treatment and preferential ratings to the banks, yes.
Deregulation,
deregulation. Okay, the yeah, obviously the banks weren't regulated and also weren't you know, people weren't arrested or really faced any consequences. That's true.
As in financial interest above the interests of ordinary people.
Okay, that's capitalism. Let's be clear. Putting the interests, the thing he just, that is just capitalism. Capitalism as a system is built to put the interest of capital owners above everybody else. That's just kind of the way capitalism works. But okay, fair enough. You know, that's more of a...
Actually had some of the same protagonists involved. I'm not suggesting they're major players, but certainly people that worked at Lehman Brothers and Deutsche Bank now work at Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, that's enough of a connection. Deregulation somewhat led to this situation, and it's even possible that people will continue to profit in spite of the fact that on the surface loads of money has gone missing or disappeared.
Keep in mind, all the venture capitalists who pulled out their money, they all got their money at the expense of all the other depositors. If the federal government was not willing to backstop the rest of the depositors, all of those people who, granted, had a lot of money, quite frankly, but like all of those people would lose a lot of that money. Meanwhile, the venture capitalists would be the ones who actually walked away with all of their investment funds. Keep that in mind.
Let's get into this story in detail and see what it can teach us about the way that Washington and Wall Street interact, the symbiosis and revolving door between those two institutions, and how ultimately, even if Joe Biden literally goes on the TV and says taxpayers won't pay for it, if you change the word taxpayer to the word you, that might not be true. Here's a mainstream media news take, MSNBC, you know how those guys love me. Hopefully, they won't make this a partisan issue. They'll accept that there are a lot of institutional problems that need to be resolved that neither party are addressing. They won't simply say this is the fault of one of the parties, you know, the one we don't like.
5 years ago, when Republicans were last in control of the House of Representatives, they used the opportunity to roll back banking regulations put into place after the 2008 financial crisis.
Do you see that what they're essentially
Okay. Well, let me...
saying is, this is Trump's fault. Here's Trump surrounded by people. Now, of course, Trump's actions do contribute to this current crisis. But is that the entire story? No, because already what he's not...
Is he going to say it?
...is in 2008, Barack Obama bailed out the banks after that financial crisis, meaning that the people that literally caused that problem were given the opportunity to participate in the resolution of that problem as well.
Well, the bailout... Okay. When we talk about a bailout, when the banks were bailed out in 2008, a way that was done was through a quantitative easing, which is essentially just like printing money for any of these banks to basically start reinvesting and functioning all over again. The actual problem with like the problem with the bailout, right, back in 2008 isn't really the fact that we bailed the banks out, because if we hadn't have done that, our economy was going to be utterly fucked. Right? Like the same way like bailing out Silicon Valley Bank is the right thing to do from a pragmatic stance. The issue with the way these bailouts usually end up is that we bail them out and then allow them to go out and do exactly whatever the fuck they want, meaning they're going to end up doing basically what they did before, with the assurance that the federal government is going to protect them from any consequences. If you wanted, you know, if we had bailed out the banks and then federalized them, or had seized like a percentage of the bank so to secure like you know, the American people's interests in this bank, that would be a whole nother conversation. But we didn't do any of that. You know, a couple of the banks folded, nobody went to jail, all of them basically scattered back into the banking industry and just scattered out into the winds. And now, you know, we find out, you know, I got no doubt that some of them ended up at Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley in and of itself is a kind of shady place when it comes to finance. Just the kind of way money moves around and kind of the way like you have all these companies that don't turn profits, but they like, you know, their stock portfolios are really good, or their like stock price is really high. So like the only way that as they function as a company, and the only way that they pay like their owners, their investors and stuff like that, is through like stock options, which is really just speculative money. But like if the company ever went under, the people who they owe debts to would be completely fucked, because there wouldn't be anything for them to actually, like, there's no liquid assets, there's no liquid money for them to actually pay any of their debts by. They're living on credit basically. But yeah, like yeah, he is right. Like back in 08, we didn't do what we should have done and nationalize some of these banks and like put stronger restrictions on them. That's the part where the Obama administration and Biden also come into this. They didn't do enough to actually like punish and restructure our banking system in the US to avoid future disasters. It didn't help that Dodd-Frank wasn't that strong, and it damn sure didn't help when Trump just got rid of the already really weak regulation we did have, which again, even then, you could track back to the repeal of Glass-Steagall back in the 90s by fucking Clinton. So like Democrats and Republicans both participate in all of this stuff.
As being exculpated from the blame that they ought rightly have shared in. No one went to prison, no one was penalised properly, whereas across America and across the world, ordinary people lost their homes, lost their jobs, measurable, meaningful consequences.
Other countries' economies fucking collapsed because of the 08 crash.
Let me know in the comments. Just in case you don't know everything about the complex and deliberately obtuse world of global finance, here are some facts. On Friday, California regulators shut down the Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, a top lender to venture capital firms and tech startups. And the federal...
Now keep in mind, what's it called? A lender to venture capital. Venture capitalists at the end of the day are going to be like you always have to remember, venture capitalists are pretty much just gamblers. Like they are business professional gamblers. If you're a venture capitalist, you're looking for investments, especially again, we're talking about Silicon Valley. So we're talking about venture capital getting, putting investments into apps, into, you know, technologies, software, you know, not as much hardware, but a lot of software kind of stuff. So keep in mind, like, that's kind of who they've been lending money to. And that's kind of the, you know, the tech startups and everything else. So, you know, the amount of money they were lending out wasn't, you know, they overreached with how much they were lending out.
Deposit Insurance Corporation took it over following a bank run by its customers. I think that means a load of people took out their money at once. On Sunday, regulators closed New York-based
huge amount,
Bank.
like
during the pandemic, startups and technology companies enjoyed heady profits, some of which they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank. Flush with their cash, the bank did what banks do. It kept a fraction on hand and invested the rest, putting a large share into long-dated treasury bonds that promised good returns when interest rates were low. So far, so good.
Oh yeah, keep in mind also, I don't know if it was earlier this week or last week, we saw Jerome Powell talk about the Fed's practice of raising interest rates and being really aggressive in raising those interest rates. That also is what led to this scenario. Without those interest rates being as high as they were, which again, keep in mind, are like explicitly, or maybe not, obviously he dodged the question, but like implicitly we know that raising those interest rates makes money harder to borrow, which means companies, businesses are going to hire less people, give less out in terms of wage increases, and probably scale back some of their you know, the human resource of their businesses, which is going to cost a lot of people their jobs. So in an attempt to basically manufacture an environment where less Americans work, more Americans lose the jobs that they have, they have also basically killed this bank, or at the very least like instigated a factor into what killed this bank. Again, there are many forces of that led to why the bank crashed, but this is certainly one of them. The interest rates, the over leveraging, the over the bonds being too high. Well, that's the interest rate, but yeah, and then the obvious bank run.
As them interest rates remain low, nothing to worry about. We'll be rich, I tells you. But then, starting a little more than a year ago, the Fed raised interest rates from near zero to over 4.5%.
Such a fucking jump.
As a result, two things happened. The value of the Silicon Valley Bank's holdings of treasury bonds plummeted because newer bonds paid more interest. And as interest rates rose, the gusher of venture capital funding to startup and tech companies slowed because venture funds had to pay more to borrow money. As a result, these startup and tech companies had to withdraw more of their money from the bank to meet their payroll and other expenses, but the bank didn't have enough money on hand. Yesterday, we also spoke to Ryan Grimm, who talked about a text message chain where people that were invested in SVB, or at least had their money in SVB, communicated about drawing that money out prior.
Wait, I heard, okay, so yesterday on the Majority Report, I was listening to, I think it might have been Tuesday's show, but I remember the person they had on mentioned, like, they were basically in a group chat, but I thought that was like a easy summation. But were they being like 100% like honest? Like it was an actual fucking group chat? That's kind of wild.
Drawing it out. He believes that
imagine having your friends group chat basically destroy an entire bank.
Individually, why did they do it collectively? Obviously, any responsible reporting on this issue has to include the most recent and significant financial crash, the events of 2008, the political and financial ramifications of which are still being felt right now. Many people argue that Donald Trump is a consequence of Obama's significant decision to bail out the banks in 2008. The way in our country Tony Blair will ever be tethered to his decision to invade Iraq along with George W. Bush, your then president, the fact that Obama didn't say, no, I was voted in on a mandate of change and hope and supporting and...
Again, let's keep in mind, I want everyone to... So let's be very, very clear. Bailing out the banks was the right move. The problem is like a lot of Democrats, Obama never took the second, possibly more crucial step, which was nationalizing the banks and actually arresting the people at the heart of that entire fiasco, right? Like that was the other step. You bail out the banks to save the economy, and then you punish the people who put everybody at risk, and you like punish those businesses by acquiring them. Like the US government should own those banks, but instead all their assets, they got picked dry by other banking institutions. Like at the end of the day, like it's the same story with the Civil War. It's also actually the same story with the New Deal. After the Civil War, we had, I believe it was like 150 years of Reconstruction that we did not follow through on. We didn't occupy the South. We didn't like force the desegregation of that society onto them. And we are now looking at a society right now that if you like, there's a reason why Florida, Tennessee, Texas, these prominent southern states are passing like laws that don't don't force teachers to teach slavery. There's a reason for that. And the reason is because we allowed these states to continue to sell the fiction of the lost cause to their students. We allowed their society to fester in the falsities, the lies of its past. We allowed that to happen. We never took the crucial step of forcing them into reality, into the modern day. And it's why our society is splitting at these fracture points, because there are people who came up with a completely different understanding, a completely different context for one of the largest moments in American history. So like, also, and when we talk about the New Deal, we never really followed through on a lot of the New Deal. Certainly, the creation of Social Security, of Medicaid, of Medicare, like the restructuring and the, like, you know, the protections put in by the FDR administration through Glass-Steagall, all of these things that like bolstered the economy, that created a more like you know, people-centered like society. We didn't follow through on the steps. I remember we watched you know, I have a video on this, you should totally watch it. It's about like Bernie and FDR and Bernie's legacy. And we watched briefly the what FDR called the second Bill of Rights, and like that would have been the next step, you know, for you to have a right to a good paying job, a right to a home, a right to healthcare, all of the next steps to the new deal that would have put our society on such a different trajectory. But because Democrats, modern day liberal Democrats, did not follow through on that next step of the New Deal, we didn't get any of it. And it's why we sit here. It's why they do half-ass measures like bail out the banks and then not do anything else. They just bail them out and then let them go and continue and do the exact same thing they're doing now. Like, there are multiple economists, people have already said that like the economy we're sitting on, there is another bubble there, and there absolutely there's nothing stopping another '08 from happening. So like, and they just let them, after '08 they just let them go, just figured, all right, cool, they went to go do their thing, we bailed them out, and then, you know, they all took home golden parachutes, they all took home bonuses, and they all fled into the banking industry. So it's like the second step is always as important, I think, as the first step. Solving the immediate problem is only step number one. You need to learn and restructure after that first incident.
Standing up for ordinary people from across the political and social spectrum. No way, man, I'm not doing it. Instead, what did he do? He did what you would imagine he'd do. He bailed out the donors and the banks. Then they let people set up new regulations and new rules that were involved in the crisis. The whole thing's exactly what you think. And one of the things that worries me when I learn about politics, and you let me know if you feel the same way, is the things that you often intuit, like, hold on a minute, do they just like bail out their donors and stuff? You're right. Obama endorsed the Wall Street bailout and appointed a team of Clinton-era economic advisors led by Tim Geithner, who became Obama's Treasury Secretary, and Lawrence Summers, who became Director of the National Economic Council. These were the same people who in the 90s...
And keep in mind, Larry Summers went to go work in the Trump administration. Like, these guys have ties to both parties. They're not like, you know, at the end of the day, both parties are absolutely in bed with the banking industry. In the financial institutions.
Prepared the way for the financial crisis by deregulating Wall Street. So in the 90s, under Clinton, they deregulated Wall Street. They were lobbied, presumably, and they went, oh, yeah, all right, we'll
repeal of Glass-Steagall, yeah,
and bundle stuff together and make irresponsible bets.
And for anybody who doesn't know, when I say Glass-Steagall, the regulation that Glass-Steagall put in place was the inability for banks to basically invest in depositor money. So before Glass-Steagall, the banks basically, when you deposit in your money, you know, there's like, there are fees for that. There's a few other things. There's interest that they take from that. But also, if you have like credit cards, right? Your credit card payments, any of that sort of stuff, any banking products, banks could use to reinvest, to lend out, whatever they want to do with that. That is the money that they've earned as a business, as profit, that they can then do whatever it is that they do, right? What Glass-Steagall protected was them dipping into depositor money, meaning if you put your money in the bank, they're not allowed to touch that. They were not allowed to, you know, to dip into that fund pool to gamble with. Once they repealed that in the 90s for God only knows fucking reason, I don't even think I've ever heard Clinton's fucking genius reason for doing so. I'm sure it was economic growth, to which the question becomes, is economic growth like worth that kind of risk? But either way, they repealed it, and what? I think they repealed Glass-Steagall in 90. I want to say 95, but I could be wrong about the exact year. But mind you, this is like less than 15 years later, '08 happened. So, and naturally, and capitalism seems to have these booms and busts all the time. It's kind of built into the system to a degree. So also, like, you get too big of a, you get a bit of a boom and then you might get a huge bust. So, there's also that risk too.
Communicate in weird ways. Then the people that made those decisions were present in the Obama administration. So they're not going to go, oh no, those ideas that we had then, they were bad ideas. Why don't we put the people responsible for that in prison? Oh no, it's me. The Obama administration rescued Wall Street, but at enormous cost to taxpayers and the economy. Estimates of the true cost of
sometimes. So I feel like so far we've gotten like pretty decent information. Granted, they're sourcing this from like The Guardian. So like, yeah, this is solid information. But sometimes I feel like Russel Brand tries too hard to be funny. He's a funny dude, but like sometimes I'm like, all right, like you don't need to do like the voice or whatever. You can just tell me the information. Tell a joke afterwards or something.
The bailout vary from $500 billion to several trillion.
Oh, man,
I can't contextualize either of those numbers, can you? They're just abstract at that phase, but I'll tell you what's not abstract, not having an house. The Federal Reserve also provided huge subsidies to the big banks in the form of virtually free loans. But homeowners whose homes were suddenly worth less than the mortgages they owed on them were left hanging in the wind. Many lost their homes. Obama thereby shifted the cost of the bankers' speculative binge onto ordinary Americans, deepening mistrust of a political system increasingly seen as rigged in favor of the rich and powerful. Now,
yeah, keep in mind, like all the money that we used to bail them out was our money. That's our taxpayer dollars, and we got nothing out of it.
Minute we'll watch Joe Biden's speech and he says things like, capitalism's about risk. If you risk money and you lose money, that's on you.
Yeah,
but it ain't on you.
Yeah.
And he was obviously vice president when that happened. So what kind of credibility has he got when it comes to talking about financial crisis? None. What we see more and more in these investigations that we undertake
senator
here
from
at Stay Free Media is
MBNA?
that the system is rigged in order to support institutional, financial and military industrial complex power and the skill of the political class and media class is managing.
He comes from Delaware. It's a big
so it seems
credit
like
card
it's
state.
either the right thing to do, or there's no option but to do it, or the other people would have done
mainly
because
Delaware's laws are such
so we just feel
shit, and their regulations are really bad. Are really basically non-existent on financial institutions.
Democracy is an option. Independent journalism is an option.
Wait, I'm sorry. What? Huh? Go back. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying as much attention.
We see more and more in these investigations that we undertake here at Stay Free Media is that the system is rigged in order to support institutional, financial and military industrial complex power. And the skill of the political class and media class is managing that information. So it seems like it's either the right thing to do, or there's no option but to do it, or the other people would have done it worse and indeed have done it worse in the past. So we just feel trapped.
Right. Yeah. That's I think I've mentioned this before. We're like nationalizing the train, the fucking Norfolk Southern. That like it's not even on the table for Biden, which there's no reason it shouldn't be. Like there's no reason it shouldn't be with the amount of like issues they've been having, and again they're currently poisoning a community. Like like if I'm Biden, I'm like this. You poison a community in the United States. I'm the president thereof. Good luck, bitch. Your company's mine now. Don't fuck up next time. New train companies, fuck up like this, and we'll own your ass too. Like that's the only way that you really exert power. Like
in a situation where there's just no options. But the fact is, there are options. Democracy is an option. Independent journalism is an option. Independent thought is an option. Your freedom is an option. But to understand this
all of that was just platitudes.
Story a little more deeply and with a little more clarity, we have to look at events in 2015 as well. 8 years before the second largest bank failure in American history occurred, SVB's president personally pressed Congress to reduce scrutiny of his financial institution. So 8 years ago, the president of SVB, Greg Becker, personally himself...
I gotta say, this is unrelated to the topic, but I wish I had a producer to get all this shit sourced for me. That would be nice.
Deregulation. Do you know what would make things a lot easier? Go on. Deregulation. What do you mean? Let you do more stuff that you want to do without stopping you from doing it in case it causes a financial crash of some kind? Yeah, that's right. Deregulate us. Let us do...
Russell, you need to do more voices, my friend. I need more voices, or I can't tell who's talking. If you're gonna do the bit, and I'm all for bits, man. I'm all for bits. But I need different voices.
What we want to do. I see banking as being like jazz. I like my banking to be free flow. Okay, we'll deregulate you, but there won't be some sort of crisis, will there? I'm promising you, I give you my word, as a banker, there won't be. Is it me? Or does
What's
the
happening?
future feel more...
It's an ad, isn't it? Nope, stop. Oh no. Is he selling gold?
easy to protect your savings and retirement accounts with physical gold and silver.
Oh no, don't do that. Don't do that. Gold, no, stop it.
Becker submitted a statement to a Senate panel pushing legislators to exempt more banks, including his own. Obviously, other banks, not mine. I'll do it the hard way, but these other guys, give them a shot. From new regulations passed in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. So there was a massive crisis.
Just Dodd-Frank.
Were introduced.
I don't even remember what the fuck
Dodd.
Let me look up what Dodd-Frank does.
Just wait a little bit of time. Right, bit of time's passed now. Can you take those regulations off? It's making it impossible for me to make money in an unethical and currently illegal ways. 2 months later, SVB added former Obama Treasury Department official Mary Miller to its board. So they do a bit of lobbying. They appoint a former Obama administration member.
Okay, let me read this really quickly because Dodd-Frank's important. Oh, that does that. Dodd-Frank targeted financial system sectors that were believed to have caused the 07-08 financial crisis. Leading up to 2007, lax regulations led to extremely risky institutions. No, I want to... God damn you. Components. Financial stability. Under the Dodd-Frank Act, the Financial Stability Oversight Council and the Orderly Liquidation Authority monitor the financial stability of major financial firms. The failure of these companies, deemed too big to fail, could have a serious negative impact on the United States economy. The law also provides for liquidations and restructurings via the Orderly Liquidation Fund, a fund that was established to assist the dismantling. Yes. So this is okay. So the financial stability the fund that I'm referencing right now is the fund that they say that they're using basically to bail out like the depositors, right? Like that's the way in which they're doing that, is through this what is it again? Where's the fucking name? Orderly Liquidation Fund, if I remember correctly, which is sourced from like basically fees that banks are paying, amongst other things. But keep in mind, that's money that the government is collecting from them on your behalf. They're not your tax dollars, technically. I don't pay into this fund, but those dollars absolutely are within the pool of public funds. Like everything that the government spends is public funds, meaning all of it is our money. Even if I didn't pay into it, you didn't pay into it, at the end of the day, it goes into the public pool. Let's see, the FCB. Yeah, the CFPB. Love the CFPB. What's the Volcker Rule? The Volcker Rule restricts how banks can invest, limits speculative trading, and eliminates proprietary trading. Banks are not allowed to be involved with hedge funds or private equity firms, which are considered too risky. To minimize possible conflicts of interest, financial firms are not allowed to trade proprietarily without sufficient, quote, skin in the game. Oh, lovely. The Volcker Rule is clearly a pushback in the direction of the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, which first recognized the inherent dangers of financial entities extending commercial and investment banking services at the same time, but also contains provisions regulating derivatives, such as the credit default swaps that were widely blamed for contributing to the 07-08 financial crisis. Dodd-Frank set up a centralized exchanges for swaps trading to reduce the possibility of counterparty default. It required greater disclosure in swaps trading information to increase transparency in those markets. The Volcker Rule also regulates financial firms' use of derivatives in an attempt to prevent too big to fail institutions from taking large risks. Let's see. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Dodd-Frank established the SEC office. Well, that's good. And a whistleblower program. Yeah, so like Dodd-Frank did like give us like the SEC and the CFPB. The Volcker Rule is kind of a like light version of Glass-Steagall, and then like overall, like at the end of the day, none of what I said like really did any of the really put up the barriers that I think we really needed. I have to look a little bit more into it. I haven't done too much on Dodd-Frank, but I just wanted us to at least get like some kind of idea of what's in it.
And what do you know? They suddenly get their way. But don't think there's a revolving
And keep in mind,
they
got rid of
Dodd-Frank. Don't think that no matter who
obviously it doesn't get rid of the SEC or CFPB, but
don't think that there's no one in Washington standing up for your rights. In even the peripheral figures that do care about your rights, voices in the wilderness that won't have any meaningful impact because institutional power is locked into a set of interests that can't be moved by democracy. They've rigged the game. You know that already. Around that time, federal disclosure records show the bank was lobbying lawmakers on financial regulatory
Is this just like a nihilism channel?
Systemic Risk Designation Improvement Act of 2015, a bill that was the precursor to legislation ultimately signed by President Donald Trump. The bill was supported in the Senate by 50 Republicans and 17 Democrats, including Virginia Senator
yeah, do mine. 17 fucking Democrats. And granted, these are the 17 Democrats that were willing to go out there and do this publicly. Keep that in mind also.
Mark Warner, Democrat, for whom Becca held a
fundraiser fucking Virginia,
at his
no shit.
Park, California home in 2016. It's exactly what you think it is, isn't it? They hold fundraisers. If I hold a fundraiser for you, will you deregulate the banking industry so I can make money? The answer is yes. Yes, I will. Oh, before I go, does that not make you feel compromised? You know, that you're not representing the interests of the people that you were elected by to protect them, particularly in the wake of the 2008 crash? Sorry, I stopped listening after we agreed on the fundraiser. 3 years later, after the bank spent more than $500 million on federal lobbying, lawmakers obliged. That's the phases it took. A bit of lobbying, employ someone, hold a couple of fundraisers, a bit more lobbying, crack on and earn your money. Progressive critics have been quick to blame a deregulatory measure approved 5 years ago by the then Republican-controlled Congress for engendering 2 of the 3 largest bank failures in US history. Yeah, because then what you can do is you can have your cake and eat it. You can still feel like you're on the right side of history and everything and not do anything to change anything. That's what happens again and again and again. In fact, I increasingly believe that is the liberal position. Well, the only things that are available are these bastards or us bastards. And us bastards at least pretend to care about people that are slightly different from us. The GOP...
Whoa, liberals and progressives, very different. Let's be very clear. The progressive, argument or the progressive pushback is not just to Republicans but also to like the Obama administration. Progressives are not very as a voting bloc, as a kind of ideologically aligned demographic, most like leftists, especially the people more left than I am, do not have fond things to say about the Obama administration and their regulatory decisions.
However, I wasn't alone in supporting Senator Mike Crapo's, Republican Idaho, Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief and Consumer Protection Act. Even then, it wasn't just Republicans. Barney Frank, architect of the Dodd-Frank banking regulations implemented in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, played a key role in whitewashing the bipartisan effort to weaken those rules in 2018 after he had received more than $1 million while serving on Signature's board following his departure from Congress. Just take a moment to absorb that. One of the people that came up with the regulations to prevent another crash like 2008 ever happening again, this dude, Barney Frank, got a job on the board of Signature and took $1 million and participated in weakening the regulation that he himself came up. He must have known what that regulation was supposed to be doing it. How are we ever going to stop another financial crash of this nature? Well, I've come up with some regulations.
There we go. Now we have voices.
There it should work. Okay, thank you, Barney. Great work there. Couple of years. Would you mind removing some of those regulations? It's making it difficult for some of the guys to make money. Oh, yeah. I mean, would there be any problems? I can't think of any problems off the top of my head. I think I was feeling a bit regulatory that day. I was regulating everything. I regulated the cat, regulated the dog.
There's only one person there's only 2 people that should ever regulate.
We gotta loosen things up. I'm gonna need a little space, a little room.
It's Warren G and
store some of this
Nate
cash
Dogg.
that I've recently acquired that it's none of
Those are the only people who can
business where I got that,
self-regulate.
as a matter of fact. Does anyone need anything deregulated? Roll up. Anything deregulated? Well, you regulated this a couple of years ago. Yeah, you can deregulate that.
Jesus Christ, there's like so much happening right now. Okay, can we get past the bit? Can we get past the bit? I'm good on the bit part.
position on this. Remember, we're not saying that the Republicans and Donald Trump aren't to blame. They are. But also, the Democrats are to blame as well. For example, they've learned that people don't like bailing out banks, so they'll be very careful to say, we won't be bailing out the banks using taxpayer money. We've got this special miracle fund that only comes from bankers. Okay, do you think if we spend a moment pondering that, do you think the banks might look to somehow rescind those losses or mitigate those losses elsewhere? And who do you think the banks will look to get the money from? General Zod? Thanos? Baddies from the outer reaches of space?
No,
Do you think it might
come
be
on, Kang the
you?
Conqueror. We already know.
Thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe.
Don't have confidence unless you are the mark in a confidence trick, which of course we all are.
No losses will be borne by the taxpayers.
Jesus.
Instead, the money will come from the fees that banks pay into the Deposit Insurance Fund. Investors in the banks.
Yeah, which at the end of the day, go like again, those are still public funds. Like it might, like again, keep in mind, regardless, like let's see, give me a second. If we like regardless of whether we, like me, you, any of us paid into that specific fund, it's still public money. Meaning like it's money that we could use for other things.
Will not be protected. They knowingly took a risk, and when the risk didn't pay off, investors lose their money. That's how capitalism works.
That's why there's not people involved in Lehman Brothers and Deutsche Bank working at these banks. Like Joseph Gentile can't really have worked at Lehman Brothers and also at SVP. And Kim Olsen can't really have worked at Deutsche Bank and Signature. Otherwise, what Joe Biden's saying there would be a mad lie.
During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank.
How did that work out?
Including the Dodd-Frank law.
Dodd-Frank law, that's that guy, Frank, who lobbied to change the law so that a bank he worked for and who gave him $1 million could benefit.
To make sure that the crisis we saw in 2008 would not happen again. Unfortunately,
it did happen again.
The last administration rolled back some of these requirements.
Oh, that last administration where people held fundraisers. Oh, that last administration that was voted for by both parties. Oh, that last administration that was a direct result of the failures of 2008. Joe Biden.
Not wrong. Show me the lie. At the end of the day, like unfortunately, Democrats, specifically liberal Democrats like Joe Biden, like Obama, don't really have a lot of a leg to stand on. They repealed Glass-Steagall, which set everything up for 2008, and then they didn't do enough to regulate after 2008, which set things up for Trump to do that, to get rid of Dodd-Frank, and then we have this. Now again, the real question is going to be how like far-reaching the 16th largest bank in the country is, like how much of an impact that's gonna have. But Silicon Valley Bank, by the way, 16th largest bank was, but yeah, number 16. So like keep in mind, like there are 15 other larger banks. We're not, when the question comes, are we looking at a full like economic meltdown? Probably not. But admittedly, it's not. The fact that this can happen with Silicon Valley Bank, like the fact that they took these idiotic risks, they set themselves up for this much failure, and are they paying for that right now? Absolutely. That now they've been seized by the fucking FDIC. Like sure, that happened, but like keep in mind once again what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? These regulations. It's not like any of the other 15 large banks are like more like ethical, more moral, like less interested in profits. No, they're bigger. They're regulated a little bit harder. But if you don't think they've found loopholes for their size of bank, the same way these guys found loopholes in theirs, it's just...
and elected and appointed officials
in
all
a system
insist
where the accumulation of profit is at the center.
Bank, or indeed any further
it's what people are going to do.
Won't come at taxpayers' expense. On Monday, Biden was at pains to say that no losses would be borne by taxpayers, and the money would come from the fees that banks pay into the Deposit Insurance Fund of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. His comments followed those of Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, who told CBS on Sunday, "Let me be clear that during the financial crisis, there were investors and owners of systemic large banks that were bailed out, and the reforms that have been put in place means that we're not going to do that again in the same way, in a way that's visible and plain, because we worked out that we can get away with this stuff if we just change the words a little bit. But one thing we can tell you is the financial industry isn't going to be meaningfully persecuted in the same way."
At the end of the day, you like charge them fees, which is basically a tax, and then put it into a fund that's like different, but like at the end of the day, you tax them. Like it's still, it went to the government, which is still all of ours, meaning it's coming from all of us. We, at the end of the day, are the government, i.e. the American people, are paying for this.
That Joe Biden's Big Pharma, We Beat Pharma This Year bill isn't going to meaningfully penalise him. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing Pfizer come in on saying we've made record profits. What they'll do is they'll find a way of being able to say something to you, like, "Oh, we changed it, look." That won't make a meaningful difference, not to the profits of the pharmaceutical industry.
We beat pharma this year!
Jason Furman, chair of the Council of Economic Advisors.
I'm glad he put that in, because like the idea of like, oh, we beat, please, pharma's fine. First of all, the fucking like actual regulations they put in, like the actual stuff that the inflation reduction, the IRA, like any of the stuff that had to do with the pharmaceutical companies, that doesn't even kick in until 25. If I remember correctly.
Barack Obama was not convinced.
Like, way to go, dude.
Make no mistake, it does have an expected cost to taxpayers. Even Andrew Ross Sorkin, financial columnist for the New York Times, thinks it's a bailout. It's a bailout, not like 2008, but it's a bailout of the venture capital community and their portfolio companies, their investments. It's easy to see why the Biden administration is keen to avoid the B word, given the general antipathy towards the enormous bailouts that Wall Street banks received during the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, I mean, because keep in mind, venture capitalists, like, you know, they're the ones who are like, you know, you pay them to like invest your money. So it's like, yeah, like, you know, again, the people who are just like doing, you know, people who just have their 401ks, like those people we should like those are the type of normal people that I'm like, we should absolutely you know, be trying to bail out and make whole. But like, you know, these guys who just fucking gamble for a living with millions upon millions of dollars, like if you ask me, I would like, if you honestly want me to build a society, I would just be like, yeah, no, we're banking is no longer, we are not going to do this speculative market, stock market, none of it. None of this gambling on this kind of level. There's just no need for it. You want to gamble, take your ass to Vegas.
Where people from across the political spectrum came together, recognizing that their interests, shared interests, meant they ought to put aside any cultural differences and come together to confront centralized power. Have you noticed that since then, there's a lot of talk about how we're all different from one another and how we should spend all our time fighting one another based on our cultural, sexual, and identity differences? What a weird coincidence. Almost as if the culture is pumping you full of information to make you think, oh God, that person's got a different type of dicky bird than I got. And spend all your time.
What is happening? Okay.
Worrying about stuff that doesn't really matter if you stop thinking about it. Finance officials have said that covering depositor losses...
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't like the prominence that the culture war takes up, but like, I certainly would not say that like at the end of the day, you know, Americans are rather what's the word? Oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? Polarized on a number of social issues, which I think are mostly driven by you know, Republican Party propaganda and kind of the reason why the Republican Party and Republican voters in general tend to always stir up these culture war topics is mainly because the party itself doesn't really have anything else to talk about. They don't have like an economic vision for the country. They are perfectly okay with the system as it is right now. the Republican Party, not necessarily voters, but the Republican Party is absolutely in favor and okay with all of this banking stuff, all of this gambling, all of this out of control investment. Totally okay with it. All of this risk, all of it. They're okay with it. They think this is a perfectly fine system we have. So because they don't have a critique of our financial system, then they have to figure out something else to gain support from voters from, which generally then they can dip into the shared traditional values. They can dip into social anxiety. They dip into a lot of those other topics because what else are they going to talk about? Like, if they don't talk about CRT, they don't talk about wokeness, are they going to talk about any of that stuff? Fuck no. And for Democrats, they basically do kind of the same thing, but like just from the other pole, basically. Where they don't they don't really want to talk about like deregulation. They don't want to talk about regulating the banks, or if they do, they want to like nibble around the edges. They never want to talk about the system inherent to like all of these failures.
From the bank failures would be met in part by the deposit insurance fund held by the FDIC, the government corporation that supplies deposit insurance to depositors in the US commercial banks and saving banks. But Susanna Streeter, head of money and markets at Hargreaves Lansdowne, said the wider banking system will bear the brunt of the bailout of banking customers, as the money will come from fees institutions pay into the deposit insurance fund. So this won't affect you unless you use money. No, perhaps you don't use money in your life. I, of course, get through life just by, if I need a good or service, what I do is I sing them a song, and then I'll just get my money like that. So I'm not affected by banking stuff. If that happens, it will get harder to argue that the bailout will not ultimately fall on US taxpayers. But they will keep arguing it, or they'll wait a little bit of time, like they did with the 2008 regulations, before rescinding them because you're thinking about something else. Because by then, there'll be a war or a pandemic, and we'll be thinking about that, and you'll forget, oh no, there was that thing
Russel Brand,
where they lied to us again.
Isn't Russel Brand like really COVID skeptical? I believe I've seen videos of him. I'm COVID at this point. I have no interest in talking about, but like, it wouldn't really shock me. He kind of like mentioned the pandemic thing there.
Don't forget. Assuming there are wider losses not covered either by SVB and signature assets or Federal Deposit Insurance funds, part of it should be expected to fall on bank customers indirectly, Morgan Ricks, a banking professor at Vanderbilt Law School, told NBC. Okay, so let's see if there is a relationship between the way that parties are funded and the way that parties behave when in office, and if Biden's serious when he spouts invective about how the perpetrators of these events will be punished. In 2020, President Trump promised 4 more years of low taxes, light regulation, and a laser focus on the stock market. Yet professionals on Wall Street shunned Trump and funneled staggering amounts of money to his opponent. Campaign donations to Biden were 5 times larger than to Trump. What
Makes
this
sense.
clearly demonstrates to me is that there is a porous relationship between Wall Street and Washington. That if you give enough money to the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, they will legislate, regulate, and govern in accordance with your wishes, not in accordance with the people that voted them into office and power. Biden received 5 times more money from Wall Street than Trump. Do you think that receiving this enormous injection of cash will impede his ability to regulate, guide, and influence the manner in which he regulates?
Also, let's keep in mind the reason they did that is because they hedged their bets that Biden was going to win. A smart bet.
The financial industry? Or do you think he'll just take that money and forget all about it? The same way they took your vote, then forgot what they promised you. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat. Turn on the notification bell.
Okay. Wow, that was a lot. Okay. I don't have, I guess, as many issues as I thought I would. I didn't really, I went into that pretty ambivalent. But yeah, like when it comes down to it, like recognizing that the system fundamentally is rigged against you is a leftist, is the leftist critique, is the leftist frame that we work from. And the like kind of, again, I know Russell Brand. It seems like I know he's like a bit COVID skeptic and stuff like that, and probably vaccine skeptic. But on this specific issue, he's mostly right. A lot of this stuff is bipartisan. But at the end of the day, there's an aspect to this where it's like, okay, well, if we're gonna bail out the banks, which is the smart, pragmatic thing we should do, right? The question becomes, what do we get out of it? The same way, like when people say, oh, well, I don't want to pay X amount I pay too much taxes. What I think most people mean by that is I pay this much in taxes and I don't get shit for it. It's just money that leaves my bank account and just gone, nothing, right? And like when it comes down to how we organize and how we structure our society, I think it's important to recognize that we need to give people tangible returns on their investment when in terms of their tax dollars. So like, somebody telling me like, I remember like I've argued with people before where it's been like, yeah, I want like a free, a single payer healthcare system in this country. And a lot of people's argument against that is like, but you want to pay an extra 5-10% in taxes, whatever the fuck it is. Usually they say a ridiculous number, but it's going to be whatever percentage increase on taxes, to which my obvious answer is, yeah, like I'm okay with paying more if I'm getting more out of it. If you're telling me I can pay an extra whatever 10% of my income, but I now don't have to worry about getting sick and going bankrupt from surviving being sick, absolutely, I would take that. Same with college, same with a lot of this other stuff. It's all about what you get for it. And that's also the fundamental question with this bank shit. We're gonna bail these banks out. It's the smart thing to do, but what the fuck are we getting out of it? What am I getting out of it? What are you getting out of it? We're not getting anything. We're bailing these guys out so that they can go fuck over our economy again and make money in the process. What we should be doing is nationalizing it, and you and I fucking own a bank now. That's what should be happening. But, Biden's not gonna do it. So it's just like, fuck it. You wonder why Americans are so skeptical of their government, so skeptical of their politicians, so skeptical of their news media, which also again is what's the word? It gets a lot of their money from advertisements from a lot of the companies that the banks fund, and a lot of the banks even do advertisements on these news channels. It's just it's a whole thing. Like, we need a full restructuring of all this shit. I'm just the way we get information, the way we distribute information. But what is it? I mean, just being aware of. That is a definition. Yeah. Precisely, OAS music. Precisely. Like, they should if we just bought you guys out, why the fuck do we not own you? Like what kind of sense does that make? Like how many of the banks, when you default on your mortgage, pay your mortgage and then you keep your house? That doesn't happen. The banks don't do that for you and me. No, they fucking, or whoever owns your mortgage then gets your house. So why the fuck is it? Why is this relationship only one way? Why do they only take and we only we only give? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The thing that they tell, at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to click on one of these things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.